Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Roseville Wrecking Ball. The Roseville Wrecking Ball.
Joshua Shrum. He is a very talented steward, very knowledgeable.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball. This is one of those podcasts where I listen to every episode. I love what he's putting out there.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball. Josh Shrum.
Parcels of Knowledge. Does a fantastic job with that podcast.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball. He is an Article 8 scholar, and thank God. We need Article 8 scholars right now.
Tune into the Parcels of Knowledge podcast while you're on the route. That's the mailman's playbook, brother.
Good morning, and welcome back to Parcels of Knowledge, the podcast dedicated to delivering knowledge to the city letter carrier with your host, the Roseville Wrecking Ball. Today, I might sound crisper, I might sound clearer, I'm not sure. You be the judge on that, because thankfully, you guys have purchased me a new mic, and this is also a mic that can be used for the LA convention. So this will be my portable mic, and you know the drill. Today is Wrecking Crew Wednesday, and of course, like always, let's acknowledge those members of the Wrecking Crew that help make everything come together as seamlessly as possible. Rick Steiner, E.R., Tom Perry, Philip DeGilio, Chris Angeloff, Amy Tyvan, Ryan Ackers, Edmund DeVore, Miziel Guzman, Paul Siranowski, Jamie Gregory, Neil Beckman, Shannon Morris Barger, Kenneth Grigsby, Benjamin Schalhaas, Joni Weber, the Allentown Architect, or otherwise known as Stillstacks, Self-Care, G. Whiskey, Daniel Pitts, Mark Allen Kennedy II, Jason Munn, David Groskoff, and Unfortunate VP. Yes, we haven't grown in numbers, but that is absolutely fine, because these badass individuals are holding everything together. And if you would like to become a member of the Patreon, please check in the description below, and it will say a link where it would say click to support the podcast. Moving on, as it is Wrecking Crew Wednesday, the Wrecking Crew does get to choose the topic for today. And today we are going to talk about the case of the slow letter carrier. More particularly, we're going to be talking about the fact that there's no set pace for walking and no standards that we have to follow other than the 18 and 8. And even that is a little bit flexible. But we'll get into that good business a little bit later. Right now, I want to acknowledge the fact that tomorrow I will be having James Henry on, candidate for NALC president. Normally, I would ask you guys for questions. Technically, you still have time to submit some. But because of the absolute density of questions that were submitted, I want to make clear that if you don't submit it the official way at the Roseville Wrecking Ball at yahoo.com via email, then you may have a chance of your questions being skipped, because I'm doing my best to keep up with the density of these questions, but to have them all in one place would be to guarantee that your question be asked. Also, if there are repeat questions, I'm going to be condensing them. So if a question takes the form same or similar as another question, I may eliminate it for the sake of time, because this is probably our one last interview with James Henry before the convention. And with that being said, it's probably not going to be a two-parter, so I'm going to get as much as I can into the one episode that I will have. So, yeah, it's kind of sad
Emotional
that there's a chance you may get your questions skipped, but I'm doing my best to keep it all in one place. Please, if you haven't submitted it to Roseville Wrecking Ball at yahoo.com, please do so I can rest assured that your question doesn't get skipped. So, yes, going into the good business today. It's not going to be too long. It's just going to be a couple different things. I want to talk about the fact that, first of all, we do have an 18 and 8, but is there a such thing as an ideal letter carrier? Certainly, postal managers wish such a being existed, the perfect performer who always worked at the same pace, which is to say, as fast as possible in management's eyes. However, NALC stewards know that a letter carrier is an individual and they have rights that are protected by the national agreement to work their routes at a speed that reflects their individual best effort. Yes, 18 and 8 is a standard of casing, but as we may already understand because we are stewards, we know that managers are prohibited from disciplining carriers for failure to reach particular standards in most situations where they're actually trying. As we already understand, the M39, section 242.332 specifically states, no carrier shall be disciplined for failure to meet standards except in cases of unsatisfactory effort, which must be based on documented unacceptable conduct that led to the carrier's failure to meet office standards. With that being said, they have to document the fact that you're not trying hard enough. I think that's a very difficult thing to document. A bone of contention between management and carriers is the speed at which a carrier delivers a route. I'm going to be reading from an article from the winter of 1998, Activist. It still stands true today, but if you think it's a little bit off, that's the reason why. It's from 1998. In a regional level arbitration, C-17434, this article will be going over that regional level arbitration decision and the circumstances in which it came to be, which still stand true today. The Postal Service attempted to argue that letter carriers should be disciplined for driving too slowly, presenting the argument that there was, in fact, a standard for appropriate speed on mounted routes. In his ruling, the arbitrator upheld the principle that there is no standard for speed in delivering the mail. Carriers work their own speed to the best of their ability. Beginning in late 1995, postal management began issuing letters of warning to letter carriers for unsatisfactory performance. The letter carrier in question had been in the Postal Service for 23 years and was a union officer. A supervisor who had recently come to the station determined that this carrier took too much time to deliver his route. The supervisor claimed to have analyzed the route and determined that the carrier's rate of delivery, about 80 per hour, was much too slow. With the postmaster's consent, the supervisor decided to correct this alleged problem by issuing progressive discipline. The union grieved the first letter of warning, and the grievance was sustained in expedited arbitration. However, before that arbitration decision had been determined, the supervisor decided that the grievant had not responded positively to the first letter, so the supervisor issued a second letter of warning in February of 1996 for unsatisfactory performance. That letter was also grieved, and while it was proceeding through the grievance procedure, the supervisor decided to take additional steps to improve the grievance performance. The supervisor observed other carriers delivering the grievance assigned route in less time than the grievant, making about 100 deliveries per hour. The supervisor then observed the grievant delivering the same route and decided that the grievant was wasting time improperly servicing the mailboxes and was also driving too slowly between mailboxes. For these reasons, the supervisor issued a 7-day suspension in July of 1996. The union grieved the 7-day suspension, but before that case reached arbitration, the supervisor in October 1996 issued a 14-day suspension to the carrier for the same reasons. Happy Halloween. In the meantime, the arbitration on the second letter warning was held, and the arbitrator upheld management's actions. Therefore, at the time of the current case of the 14-day suspension reached arbitration, The record showed that of the 3 previous disciplines that had been issued, 1 had been reversed in arbitration, 1 had been upheld, and the most recent, the 7-day suspension, was awaiting arbitration. All these actions were based on the supervisor's perception that, as he stated in the October letter announcing the 14-day suspension, the grievant drove his delivery vehicle at a very slow rate of speed in between deliveries, most times not traveling over 2 to 3 miles per hour, with the vast majority of the time not traveling over 5 miles per hour. Other employees have been observed delivering routes, including the grievance, at a more normal rate of speed without any way jeopardizing safety and or efficiency. Further, the grievant gave no valid explanation for his action. The grievant also gave no reason as to why he had not corrected his behavior, even after all the supervisor's previous attempts at correction. Does that sound familiar? That's pretty much in every single discipline. Furthermore, the grievant continued to demonstrate total disregard for the supervisor's authority, as is evidenced by his steadfast insistence on continuing to drive at abnormally slow rate of speed. The union agreed the 14-day suspension, and the grievance proceeded to arbitration. As part of the arbitration hearing, the arbitrator accompanied the grievant as he drove his route and observed his rate of speed. Interesting. I love when arbitrators get a hands-on experience of what was going on. USPS arguments. The Postal Service advocate framed the central issue as the grievant deliberately refusing to perform as instructed by the supervisor. The supervisor testified about the slow speed of the grievance deliveries, and also that previous instructions from the supervisor and all previous disciplinary actions based on the grievance poor performance were intended to improve the grievance delivery speed. The Postal Service argued because the other letter carriers could and did deliver the grievance route more quickly, the grievant should speed up his rate of delivery. However, the grievant continued to demonstrate the same deficiencies despite all attempts by the supervisor to force the grievant to speed up. Management defended the supervisor's actions in issuing further discipline before receiving the results of earlier disciplinary actions. Since the merits of each discipline should stand on its own, the fact that an earlier discipline had not yet been ruled on is invalid and should have no bearing on the disposition of this case at hand, which we all know is not true. As the supervisor saw it, the fact that the grievant continued to the behavior that had generated the earlier disciplinary actions proved that the grievant had total disregard for management's authority. Therefore, the Postal Service advocate argued additional and more severe discipline was completely warranted. NALC arguments. The main argument presented by the union advocate was that there was no proof of unsatisfactory performance. Remember what I read from the M39? In submitting its disciplinary request to USPS District Relations, the supervisor did not state any specific rule, regulation, policy, and/or order that was violated. Rather, the supervisor stated that the grievant was driving too slowly in delivering the mail, had been told he was driving too slowly, and continued the same practice even after the instruction. The NALC advocate pointed out that nowhere in the contract or manuals governing the terms and conditions of letter carrier work is there any reference to a street standard that must be met by all carriers. Further, no supervisor is authorized to set such standards. In this case, the supervisor cited the performance of another carrier, a PTF, who delivered the route in less time than the grievant. However, a regional arbitration decision by arbitrator Levick, C5952, stated comparisons of performance between individual carriers cannot be used as the basis for discipline. Rather, each carrier must be individually evaluated, and office and street times for each route should be set according to the performance of the carrier on a specific route. The union also protested the action of management in continuing to impose discipline before knowing the results of arbitration of previous disciplines. If an earlier discipline is thrown out by an arbitrator, as happened with the first letter warning issued to this grievant, then any record of that disciplinary action should be struck from the grievance record. in continuing to pile up discipline upon discipline without waiting for the results of each arbitration, Postal Management clearly indicated that it was not interested in the basic principles of progressive discipline. The union advocate stated, rather, the intent of these rapid-fire disciplinary actions was to harass and embarrass a veteran carrier who also happens to be a union activist. The current grievances should not be sustained. The current grievances should be sustained. Anyway. All right, so let's get to the arbitrator ruling. In addressing the merits of the case, the arbitrator came immediately to the core issue, that there is no standard speed established for driving between mailboxes to make deliveries. The arbitrator stated, since there is no standard, the service can't reasonably show one was violated unless unbiased objective evidence clearly shows obvious malingering. By a camcorder, for example. The supervisor, whom the arbitrator characterized as hard driving, was clearly not an impartial observer. Further, the arbitrator stated every carrier is not required to drive as fast as the fastest driver. We all have like a race car driver in our offices. That would be awful. The arbitrator rejected the union's argument that because management had imposed a 14-day suspension without knowing the results of arbitration of previous discipline, the suspension was improper. As the arbitrator saw it, the purpose of discipline, at whatever level, is to put employees on notice of what management expects and will act against with more severe discipline if repeated. Therefore, in the arbitrator's opinion, management need not wait for each discipline to be resolved before issuing another discipline for the same behavior. The bigger issue for the arbitrator, however, was whether the grievant clearly understood why he was being disciplined in the first place. Effective progressive discipline requires that the person being disciplined be aware of the exact nature of the rule, regulation, policy, or order that is being violated. The supervisor was unable to cite such a rule, but rather relied on a subjective judgment of the grievance performance as unsatisfactory. For this reason, the arbitrator sustained the grievance and instructed management to make the grievant whole for any money and benefits lost as a result of the 14-day. Note to stewards. In the final analysis, this case demonstrates a basic principle of approaching grievances involving discipline. The behavior cited by management in issuing the discipline must be a violation of a rule, regulation, policy, or order. A charge of poor performance cannot stand by itself. Rather, management must be able to prove that the grievant was guilty of deliberate misconduct. The standards set in arbitration for such proof include the testimony of reliable witnesses or preponderance of evidence. In this case, management had only one witness, the supervisor who issued the discipline. This person could not cite a specific rule or procedure that the grievant had violated. As part of the arbitration hearing, the parties recreated the circumstances leading to the issuing of the discipline. In that reenactment, the arbitrator was unable to find any evidence that the grievant had behaved as the supervisor claimed. And in any event, a charge of driving too slowly is not a basis for discipline unless management has objective proof of deliberate malingering, as the arbitrator pointed out. Postal management constantly pressures letter carriers to speed up, whether in the office or on the street. This case illustrates that management cannot simply claim a carrier is not performing at an appropriate speed. There is no standard for appropriate street time. Rather, each carrier has the right to set his or her own speed on their individual abilities and capacities. Knowing this right, stewards should be alert to protect carriers from arbitrary management demands to speed up. Now, I do want to make some quick notes before we end this episode. I do want to make clear that it is your best interest to work what I like to call safely and precisely. If a supervisor ever comes to you with the fact that they think that you're going too slow, remind them that you're going at the pace in which you are to be safe and precise as you're expected. Your preciseness is protecting the sanctity of your job. It's delivering the mail as the law demonstrates you should. You know, you want to get every letter in the correct box. You want to deliver it on time. Working safely ensures that you are going to make it home at the end of the day. In addition to that, you're always instructed to work safely. So both things take time. Working safe and precisely is going to take time. And you want that because it is inherently important to the protection of your route. I can't express how much it is important to protecting our jobs and protecting our routes and protecting the sanctity of the job that we do on a day-to-day basis. Your route will be added to if you think every day about, hey, I want to get home faster today. I want to get home in a good time. And you continue to run your route, you will get added to. This will only become harder and harder to do and will absolutely hurt you in the long run. There is no worse thing you can do to your fellow carriers than to absorb parts of everybody else's routes because you're going to eliminate routes yourself. They already do route adjustments in an unfair way, and you're only making it worse because they use prior data if it suits them. And in any new route adjustment process, they will also potentially be using prior data. So make sure that data shows that you're working safely and precisely. Every one of these routes is 8 hours or more if you do everything that the handbooks and manuals say. If you need a reminder in what the handbooks and manuals say, I have several episodes that go over route protection. Most notably, I have episode 1, the very first episode I started this on, and that is because this is one of my most important topics. I think that it's important that we understand that we're not in the perfect environment right now. The Postal Service is pulling its pockets inside out, and the letter carrier is being attacked for working at a speed that is regular. So we're constantly being conditioned by management like we're cattle, and they're trying to speed us up. Me in particular, they had recently done 2 things because of the fact that they want us to speed up. We have historically had a no lunch policy here at Roseville, Michigan. In fact, a lot of Michigan installations, especially in Michigan 1, have that policy. They have inherently took that all away because they think that if we take our lunch, if we're forced to take our lunch, they're saying, hey, I'm not taking your no lunch, but we're changing the policy. Now, if you work overtime, you're not allowed to have it. That's ridiculous. But it's just a carrot on a string. All it's doing is they know that these guys, since 98% of my office takes a no lunch, they know these guys want to get home on time. These guys are fixed on getting home at an early time. They know that if they take this no lunch away on the condition that they have overtime, every OWA who wants to get home on time is going to be rushing their shit because they don't want to be punished by taking a lunch and going home in an additional 30 minutes after. To make matters worse, they also increase the start time by an hour. I think these things are twofold. I think they're trying to achieve the same result by pushing us forward an hour. They're also making that feeling of, hey, I want to get home on time worse. So now instead of 8 a.m., we've been working at 9 a.m. We'd be lucky to go home before 7:30 if we're on the ODL. So these people are like, shit, I don't have any time to spend with my family anymore. And I'm having difficulties with trying to line up childcare and all these other things. So they are thinking that it's reasonable to rush their route, and that's management's plan. It is all of our duties to stop that from happening. And we can't prove them that they're right because it's just going to continue to escalate. That is inherent. That is 100% important. Please, with all my being, I'm asking you, please don't prove management right. We can't afford to lose more routes, and we shouldn't have to. This job is hard enough working at a safe and precise pace. It is not in our best interests to give in to that bullying and intimidating. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be some struggle. But like Martin Luther King said, there is no progress without struggle. And it's time for us to unfortunately start struggling. But if we do, we will prevail in the end. I think it's very important. Anyway, hopefully you learned something valuable today. And as always, have a good day.
If these guys are getting educated, we will be in big trouble.
Management's been weighing you down like a bag of wet catalogs, but you don't gotta take it. You strap on the elbow of education, dig it?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Roseville Wrecking Ball. The Roseville Wrecking Ball.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball is an Article 8 scholar, and thank God, we need Article 8 scholars right now. The grievous genius is the Roseville Wrecking Ball, doing amazing work.
Tune into the Parcels of Knowledge podcast while you're on the route. That's the mailman's playbook, brother.